that any of us have, thank you, that any of us have made or that BFJ has made that would suggest that our parking requirements are creating more parking than is needed. So anybody want to comment on any of the above?
One just small thing. We should make sure that we don't overlook the parking issue, because I think that was technically first on the agenda.
Oh, you're right. Thank you for that. I should log into Novus and then I wouldn't be going out of order.
So let's start by saying that I agree with, it seems like we've reached some sort of consensus that we will not extend the moratorium. And I just want to say that I feel like we heard people's concerns, and the principal concern about was whether the current zoning would adversely affect our infrastructure or place too great of a burden on our emergency services or on our school district. And we did a thorough analysis, and we asked for some extended and sort of more aggressive input on those issues. And it was pretty clear that the zoning as it is not likely to have a negative impact on any of those aspects of the village. So seeing as we've addressed the issue that we set out to address, I feel confident that we can bring the moratorium to a close. So we'll start with that.
I might also add to that, that certainly in the commentary we had back in our November town hall meeting and in some of the commentary that I've had just chatting with people since, what arises, as was clear that night, is the sense that we've had an awful lot of change with several fairly significant projects by Pleasantville standards all arising at the same time or in rapid fire order. And couldn't we just have a breather? And I totally understand the motivations behind that. The problem, of course, being none of us collectively get to decide when the moment arises for an individual property owner to sell or to decide to redevelop. And clearly, it's not within the right of government to say we're going to establish zoning that provides you with certain rights to develop, but then tell you now is the right time. So
yeah, and I mean, I totally sympathize with that sentiment.
I do too.
But I think that effectively we have had a breather, and part of that is because unrelated to any decisions that we make, but the work on the sawmill thankfully is finished. So that gives us a little bit of a reprieve. And the major construction on the 2 downtown apartment projects have come to a close. And so it does feel like there's a little bit of calm right now. And I think everybody appreciates that. And I think the moratorium probably contributed to that, because it gave, part of it was just coincidental, but we did have a little bit of a pause. So hopefully people are feeling, more optimistic in general.
And the other interesting piece to note is that with the exception of the project at 444 Bedford, which had been before the planning commission prior and then decided to pause because of the moratorium, we looked, as you can all see in the BFJ memo, at a bunch of different soft sites. I say soft sites, so-called soft sites that were imaginably big enough to allow a significant construction that could provide parking on site. And although it's clear that some of them have mid or longer term potential, we're not aware of any at the moment that are immediately likely to be active. And so all of that suggests that for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is the changing finance environment with higher interest rates, that we're likely to see a little bit of a pause in some of what's going on in the development world. I say that, recognize also that for reasons all of us are well aware of, Pleasantville's a good place to be and a good place to live, and it's been an attractive place for folks to think about living or investing. And I think the results of the projects we have recently seen. Toll Brothers, the 39 Washington project, the Atwood project, which is down by the sawmill off Grant Street, and likely the soon to be occupied 70 Memorial. I think they have all been very, very well received and pretty quickly leased. Obviously, 70 Memorial has not leased yet. So blessings and burdens are attached together, right? Good place to be, good place to live, attracts more interest in things changing.
But I think one thing that's been reassuring is that the project that's by the sawmill, and I think the same thing can be said for the project on Washington Avenue, is that we've had a chance to see that it has not impacted the traffic in a significant way. I think the one that's near the sawmill in particular, like people had questions about that because of that location, which is somewhat of a already a sticky situation traffic wise. But it's kind of nice to see that we don't have a big influx of traffic, at least at this point, due to that new building.
Well, and further, the conversations we've had throughout this moratorium discussion make clear that there are impacts of some sort at every site. And it's not as though we have the alternative of, for example, a residential project or no activity and no impact. So, I mean, certainly what we've seen, I think at 39 Washington, and as you already said, at the Atwood down by the sawmill, is that although residents own cars, part of the reason they've chosen to live in these locations is proximity to services and restaurants and the like, and proximity to the train. So they have cars. It's not that they don't ever use them, but the level of vehicular activity has been pretty modest. I've stood in front of both of those places at various points for a good long while and have been struck by the relatively quiet scene we have seen. So
yeah. So do you want to bring up any other issues with respect to, so I guess, are we going to make any other decisions tonight?
Well, so the question in play for the moment was there an inclination on the part of the board to rescind the 15% FAR bonus provided for meetings, the design guidelines. So short version, longer story, that gives you a 15% increase in potential square footage based on the lot size.
Right, so I can speak to that, but Paul, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, so
Your...
my in thinking about just overall, looking at something that I noticed is, as we said, the only real project that we have going on is near New Bedford Road, 440, the proposed, that they've already started their procedure. They're also the only ones that ask for an exception. So they've also put capital and time into that. So I do think that looking at each project and getting this study that we had done and being able to see how it's going to impact, I know that there's possible soft sites that could get developed, but we also know that a lot of those sites don't have the ability to add what we'll need, like underground parking and all these different type of things. So they don't concern me as much now, knowing more after we've done the study. So I do believe that moratorium ending is reasonable for it to end now. I'm still kind of up to debate with what we do going forward with our zoning laws in general. I do also feel for 440 in that they're really the only players in the game right now that have been actively trying to do something. And obviously, whatever we do has to, if we do decide to change the zoning, it has to be done very quickly so that they can adjust their plans. But a part of me also does believe that maybe they could be grandfathered into our current zoning laws. Because I've looked at their proposal, it's been already presented to the planning commission. I see what they have, what's available, what they're looking to do with that location. So a part of me just kind of has me conflicted on that, and whether, when is there a sunset date to when we put this, any kind of change overall. So that's kind of where I am stuck on that part.
Okay.
Any thoughts, David, to throw into that?
Sure. as I think you did you gave us a pretty concise summary of where we stand. I agree that we had a substantial task presented to us by residents to understand the potential impact on infrastructure, on emergency services, on power generation and transmission, on traffic, obviously, on the schools, et cetera. And we did that. And, when that was challenged, we also made even more conservative assumptions and looked at that. And we've really answered a question that I think was very relevant, not just because we have this difficult triple convergence of work on the sawmill with two major mixed use development projects happening at the same time, but also because we had just gone through the pandemic. So, and that changed lots of things about how our village works. So I'm very glad that we did this. And I think for the village, you should feel confident now that although there may be lots of unpredictable effects of development in the village changing in the downtown A1 district over time, it's really changing in a way that was foreseen and planned, since I'm not sure what Michael Peppard would say, but at least since the 60s. And for sure in the 2017 master plan. So as in terms of what we do going forward, I think looking at the view shed is very helpful. I do think we need to start to look at other communities, and this is something that is a longer term project, but there's real opportunity. I don't see now that somebody who makes, let's say, two times minimum wage or is living on Social Security payments can realistically afford to live in the village. And I think that it would be helpful for all of us if people who worked in our shops, if our parents who are not necessarily affluent and our children on their own could afford to come and get their start in the village and not just have this be a place of reward for good work, well done and amply compensated. And so I think that we have the opportunity with examples from around the country to think more creatively about how we could improve the availability of affordable housing beyond just increasing the percentage of required units in any mixed-use development or residential scenario. As to the question of the FAR bonuses and the requirements that go with them, I would be supportive potentially of writing all of that into the zoning, meaning making them making the things that generate the bonuses required, but then also including the bonuses as a regular part of the zoning. But
you mean increasing the permitted FAR, the base FAR by 15%?
Yes, but also requiring the things that allowed the bonuses to get to be unlocked as part of the base zoning code as well.
Understood. That's going the other way from the discussion about possibly rolling back the bonus, but still making the right.
Yeah, I would just sort of say, my theory would be, and I don't know again how simple this is to do, would just be to make the bonus a permanent feature and not a bonus, but just sort of a yes, so you have to do these things.
That would increase the base FAR.
Yeah, there might be a way to do it to achieve the same outcome as today, but to basically require that everybody does it. That would be.
Yeah, I mean, that's easy to do.
Yeah. So anyway,
just to be clear, that would increase the potential number of apartments on a given site.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, and I don't expect that that's necessarily something that everybody will be ready to do tonight or before the end of the month. But my concern is actually, sort of looking, there's been a lot of good journalism in the last couple of weeks since our last meeting, talking about some of these issues, looking at California and Oregon, but also importantly, looking at Scarsdale and looking at the governor's plans. I know some voluntary measures or some incentive measures, I should say, have been adopted by executive order, but I suspect that the towns and municipalities that are thinking creatively and proactively about how to create housing that allows working people to live in the in towns like Pleasantville without being in financial services or legal services or lottery winners, I think would be is helpful and would be important, and will do better when the negative side comes down, meaning the things that are not just incentive based and not just optional for us. So that's sort of where I stand. I don't think the data really supports doing anything to reduce the density of our A1 district in particular. And that because it seems to be working the way that it was planned, and we do not have any excess demands upon the schools or infrastructure or power or anything like that. And like Peter, I didn't spend as long as Peter did, but I've paid attention to the buildings that now have become occupied, particularly the one there on Depew Street by the sawmill. And I'm even knowing what the data suggested, I'm surprised by how peaceful it all seems. Thank you.
Okay, you want me to weigh in next? So,
Sure.
so I've thought about, I've spent a fair amount of time thinking about this. And just to start from sort of a global perspective, I feel like it's important to maintain a balance. Like I understand people's anxiety about the fundamental character of Pleasantville changing, and that is not something that I want either. One of the things that I feel like is very important to the way that sort of sets Pleasantville apart from some of the other communities in Westchester is that we have this kind of old-fashioned structure where we have a centralized downtown area with a commercial district with a greater density of housing in the downtown. And as you move outward, it becomes less dense, right? It's sort of in that sense, a very traditional village model. And I feel like that's part of what makes Pleasantville because you have, the walkability, you have a more vibrant downtown, you have this space where, people can interact and encounter each other. And so I'm always thinking of that structure when I'm thinking about the kind of choices that we have to make when it comes to zoning. So I'll tell you what my conclusion is, and then I will sort of explain a little bit what my thinking is. My inclination is not to make any changes to the current bonus for FAR structure. One of the reasons for that is we've talked a lot about this question of affordability, and I feel like that's one of the themes that we heard a lot going back to the community meeting that we hosted in November. I would say if there's anything that there was consensus about, it was this question of, I would love for, my aging parents to be able to afford to live in Pleasantville. I would love for Pleasantville to maintain a kind of economic diversity, which it has had for a long time, but all of a sudden seems like a precarious thing that might change, right? And so based on the research that I've done, my sense is that and it's difficult no matter what, I'm being realistic, but the best thing that we can do to maintain a little bit of diversity when it comes to the affordability of housing is to allow a slightly greater density of housing in the downtown area. So my sense is that, for instance, if we were to change the zoning to make it harder to build apartment units in the downtown, and then we were, in addition, to layer on top of that an increased percentage demand of affordable housing, you would end up with fewer affordable housing units than if we didn't increase the percentage, but we just left things the way that they are. You guys are following so far, yeah. So that's one factor for me. And then another factor for me is the environmental issue, which is that, look, I don't want Pleasantville to like double in size or anything like that. Like I want it to stay reasonable. So that's, where this like balancing issue comes into consideration. But we've had this analysis, we've seen the sites that could be developed, and it's not all of the A1 district, right? It's a limited number of sites that currently have all of the factors that make them possible to develop. My sense is that if we are going to have development, and this goes back to the environmental issue, I would prefer to see a little bit more development in the downtown area near transportation, rather than having, clear cutting trees and creating developments in existing areas that are currently green spaces. And we're not talking about this tonight, but I will just throw into the mix that I do think it's important to think about green spaces as well in the downtown, and to have the civic space on our horizon as something that we want to develop. So in short, where I'm currently landing is to preserve the status quo for the time being, and then to look in more depth into these issues that we're concerned with, for instance, the view shed issue that Michael brought up and so on. So, Peter, what do you think?
So, as is true for all subjects, everybody's got good points, and I think I largely ratify what my two colleagues here said and what David said. I was the only member of the boards here at the time we did the 2017 master plan update, and I will say with conviction that the 5 members of the board at the time, 4 people who are not sitting here any longer, and I were unanimous that it was a right-minded vision for the future. And I think if we drew those 5 people back together today, we would, with some satisfaction, say that 6 years later, a significant piece of what was hoped for was achieved. So the other point I wanted to make, and it arises in conversation I have with folks about this on all sides of the issue, is that the development that we have seen is largely the result of some changed circumstance in the underlying property. And so one does not have the option of saying, we're going to have a vibrant downtown if we don't allow anything to happen, because in most all of these locations, they had ceased to be a vibrant piece of our downtown, and painfully, I say painfully on my own behalf, the elements of a vibrant downtown for a community like ours are different from what they were a generation or 2 ago. We're no longer going to be the place that I moved to 30 some odd years ago, Pleasantville, New York, with a hardware store and 2 pharmacies and 3 places to buy shoes and 2 women's clothing places and a sundries and stationery store. I recall saying when we moved here that it was a downtown that had one of everything. There are very, 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 very few small downtowns in our realm that can claim to have one of everything any longer, probably none. And we're not going to get back a lot of those things that at one point were sort of the core elements of a downtown. We have been successful because it's a vibrant and interesting place to be, and we have a train station, and we have seen what were once retail uses turning in many cases to restaurants and services, and those have been very well received, and it has established vibrancy for our community. We are fortunate to have the Burns Film Center. A brief aside, shout out to them. Yesterday they had a sold out Barbie weekend. Literally all the shows sold out, and an event at the parking lot of the Media Arts Lab that sold out the food truck. They literally were out of food. 150 people and a whole lot of pink clothing. So shout out to Rhododendron across the street. Also grabbing the Barbie thing. So at any rate, I say that to say there are plenty of downtowns that don't have any of those things. And honestly, there isn't all that much reason to go. So painfully, what does that mean? That means after years of arguing about how to accommodate the demand for commuter parking. Now that demand is different, and now on a Friday night, our parking demands are different. Activity to the restaurants, all of those things. Bottom line is, we can't micromanage all this change. I think we're lucky to have seen the improvements we've seen, and it is really important to realize that when individual projects are brought before the community or the planning commission, it isn't a question of should this happen or not. It's a question of is what is happening in accord with the current zoning, because the zoning tells a property owner what they're allowed to do, and they make reasonable plans based on what they're allowed to do. If we change that suddenly and without a solid basis, that's unfair to property owners and ultimately unfair to the long-term vision. So what I would say is it's clear that I think we are unanimous. Michael not here to speak for himself, but I think we can speak for him based on the previous conversations we've had in a public setting, that we're going to allow the moratorium to expire as it does naturally at the end of the month. No action is taken. It simply expires. And we will continue to look at these aspects of the zoning code that are worth conversations. And I'm going to suggest to my colleagues that come the fall, we have a series of perhaps smaller town hall events, maybe in various different neighborhoods or different settings, so that instead of a setting when there are a whole lot of people in the high school auditorium and it's hard to have a real give and take because so many people are in line to speak, that we have an opportunity to speak to people in smaller groups, maybe more geographically located, especially since certain neighborhoods, certain parts of the community are affected in different ways by development. So more on that as we give shape to it. But anybody else want to add anything to that? No?
I think that's a good idea. At one point I had a request from somebody in my neighborhood and she didn't follow through, but to have a smaller meeting. I think that I like that idea. So Jonathan, we all kind of gave our 2 cents.
Want to give your 2 cents?
Sorry, I missed it.
Are you here to give 2 cents?
Where it all ended up, though. The only thing I'll say is that I don't think anybody, well, I'm not gonna make that sweeping of argument. I certainly wouldn't argue with the notion of some change is necessary, and we've got to keep responding. I just think where I always sort of came on this issue is to close the moratorium without doing anything. I think there's stuff that can be done in between to slow things down. And I don't view zoning some might describe it as fairly caveman or kludgy approach to zoning as absolutes. I mean, I think zoning can be as fluid as the issues that are presented to the village. And, you know, if you slow things down in 3 years from now, there was a rationale to say, hey, you know, we overcorrected, you can change zoning again. I just don't think, and still be under the sort of guise of the guidelines, as much as I have issues with it, of the master plan. There's a lot of room under that master plan to make corrections and to self-correct. And I think the major issue that everybody, and a lot of people were concerned about, was not so much the fact that there's a 4-story big building on Memorial Plaza, not so much that there's a big building on
The sawmill.
the Pew and all this development, but the impact on the character and quality of life in the village. And I think those questions are still out. I don't think those have been answered. And I think that you can slow things down without stopping. And I know that those are less quantitative and more qualitative issues, which are harder to sort of manage, but to close the moratorium without doing anything seems, I mean, it's, for me, I'm not quite sure I understand that, but that's okay.
So first of all, I want to say I totally sympathize with the caveman. I would say Luddite personally, like I totally have a Luddite sympathy. So I'm with you on that.
You're the
I get
Luddite,
that.
he's the caveman.
And somebody will
So-
explain the difference.
I think it's two sides of the same coin.
Right,
I
it's-
suspect. So first of all, I push back a little bit on the characterization of doing nothing. Like, I feel like the goal of the moratorium specifically was to look at, did the current zone, what was the impact of the current zoning on emergency services, on infrastructure, on the schools, on water, and so on, right? And I feel like we did that, and then when there were concerns about, like, was this really accurate, then we dove deeper and came up with some more, conservative estimates. And so I think that was important. I don't think any of us went into that with an assumption that we knew what the result was going to be, right? So I do think that was the specific goal of the moratorium, and I feel like that goal has been achieved. So the one sort of question, the one action that we could take now is what BFJ suggested as a possibility, right? Which was we could roll back the bonus on the FER. I think that there's not consensus. What you miss is that there's not consensus among the four of us, and Michael's not able to make it tonight about that.
Is anybody in favor of doing that?
I think that I can speak for myself, which is to say, I don't find a quantitative justification for it based on all of the analysis we've done. That said, we also represent our community, and a significant number of people have been heard from, and I respect that. So in the category of thinking about how one moves a community forward with as much unanimity as there can be, everybody gets a little piece of their story, which is the basis of a functioning democracy. That said, I don't mean to suggest that I think we should do that. And honestly, I think, as Paul already mentioned, in the case of projects that have been built around our existing zoning, there's a fairness issue attached, not a legal fairness issue, but the goal of a fairness issue to say, this is what you had reason to believe you had the right to do. And I also think that the kinds of changes that have been under discussion are more about the long-term big picture than they are about anything going on immediately. So for that reason, I don't find, and I think that the analysis is crystal clear, that we shouldn't find that we're at the edge of some crisis, because we're not. I do think all of the conversations and the concerns of our community make clear that there are discussions that need to be had. I will say, when people talk about the character of the community, believe me, nobody's more interested in preserving what's good, changing what's not so good, but finding a way to maintain the Pleasantville-ness of Pleasantville into the future in a very changing world. We're confronting, as David has already pointed out, an environment where it isn't clear where regular people are going to live, right? We're in a circumstance where all of us, I can speak for myself, have young adult children who are making some decent money and can't afford to have even an apartment on their own. They would need a roommate to do it. So,
But this doesn't,
well,
this isn't solving that issue.
No, but it does speak to that
it
issue.
speaks to the issue
Yeah.
of the world is changing around us. And for example, I've had people say to me, you shouldn't have changed the zoning to allow 4 stories to 70 Memorial. And when I say, well, the reason we did that was a very thorough analysis that said that the economy is not likely to ever to generate a viable project there without at least an additional floor of revenue to build the parking below. And a couple of people said to me, it was better the way it was. Okay, well, that's an opinion you can hold. It's not an opinion that I hold. First off, what we have now produced on Memorial Plaza is the best streetscape experience, walking between the diner and taco project that has existed in the entire 38 years I've ever lived here. There was a very dark, grim period there in all those years when you walked past a crummy sidewalk and a crummy, weedy hillside and a decrepit building. So again, it's not as though we have the option to say we can squint and it's Pleasantville 1973 or Pleasantville 1985 or Pleasantville 1935, whatever it is you might imagine as a great time. I totally wish we had Barclays Hardware at 25 Wheeler Avenue. We haven't had that in 35 years and we're never getting it back. So all of the discussion about character of Pleasantville is important. One of the things, as Nicole already said, I think, is having a vibrant downtown, having a center, having a place that feels like a draw for people from disparate neighborhoods is what Pleasantville has always been about. I tell you, as you walk a block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks out into the surrounding neighborhoods, and then all the way to the edge of the village, nothing has changed. In many cases, nothing has changed in 100 years, except people have taken great care of their homes. So we're in a great place in a changing world, but doesn't mean that the change is always what any one of us individually wishes would happen.
And so when you talk about the issue of character, you know, and that can mean different things to different people, right? But one of the threads that, and I talked about this before, has been a concern about the affordability of housing. And the reason that touches on the question of character is that Pleasantville historically has had a greater economic diversity than some of the other surrounding towns, right? Like when my husband and I chose to move here, we heard that the people in Chappaqua referred to Pleasantville as Peasantville, and we were like, cool. I'm down with that, right? And
I will say in
and
Chappaqa's defense, that dates back a ways, but.
and that, sorry, I'm not trying to slander Chappaqua, but no, so this touches on the question of the affordability of housing, and that's something that's been raised a lot. And so the reason that I personally, at least as it stands, do not want to change the bonus structure for the FAR is because based on the research that I've done, the biggest thing that's going to impact whether or not we can have affordability of housing is whether or not we can have some density in the downtown. Now, I don't want it to be overwhelming, and honestly, I don't think it will be overwhelming based on what we've seen. But that is, from my
Well,
understanding.
based on what we've seen, it would be, but based on the FPJ, we may not, or what is it?
BFJ.
PFJ. There may not be as much reason for concern that you can go linear with it as might be suggested.
Right, because the current zoning doesn't mean that you can develop apartment complexes all over the A1 district, right? There are only certain spots that have all of the variables that make it financially feasible to build on those spots, right? And you know, and there are all kinds of factors that play into that. But my feeling is that if we're going to have more housing units, and I think that there's a need for it for all sorts of reasons, and hopefully it will be gradual, but nonetheless, if we're going to have a little bit more housing, I think that it's better to have a little bit more density downtown. I think it preserves the integrity of the structure of Pleasantville, which is it's more concentrated as you go toward the center, less concentrated as you go on the outside, and allows us to have a few more affordable units. That doesn't mean that, you know, it isn't still getting more expensive to live in Pleasantville. You know, it doesn't mean that suddenly, like, you know, it's affordable for everybody to move here, but it gives us some of that, right? So that was my calculation, and my other reason is an environmental one, which is that if we are going to see development, I would rather see a handful of more apartments downtown than building that requires us to cut down a bunch of trees and to create development more towards the periphery. So, but I mean, you know, we each have our own points of view on this. I don't think that we kind of arrive at a point of we're content with letting the moratorium expire, but I think the conversation is going to continue because there's not just a complete consensus on this
And
issue.
we'll continue with you and the community. It's I will say the issue that Nicole alluded to, the state focus on increase in housing. I've been right in the middle of it. In fact, the 7 of us who are on the housing committee of the Municipal Officials Association for Westchester have a conference call with Ruth Ann Visnakis, the commissioner of the HCR Department of Housing and Community Renewal, which is the state agency leading all this, to talk about what imaginably might be arriving in the governor's proposal come January of next year. Inevitably, there will be another housing proposal presented. Interesting to see what that might be, especially in a year when the Senate and the Assembly are all up for re-election. That doubtless changes the dynamic a bit. But we're trying through the WMOA to follow on in a productive way with the, I think, quite detailed letter that we issued at the time of the housing compact proposal to rebut some of the things that would have been really inappropriate for our community. So I say all of that to say, I totally believe there's a housing problem. And I totally believe that collectively we need, as a region, as a country, to address some aspects of it. What the governor proposed, in my opinion, last January was way off base and not appropriate for a community like ours. Brief aside, community like ours that's already carried quite a bit of the burden of trying to provide more opportunity. So that said, this is an issue that's going to come at us. We're not thinking what we think vis-a-vis the end of the moratorium because we're afraid of what Albany will say or do, but it's also part of the context in which the conversation will happen over the coming 6 or 9 months.
Hmm.
And I mean, that's, we're not gonna solve the housing crisis in New York State, in Pleasantville, New York.
No.
And
No, but
I kind of think the argument that, and I am sympathetic to it, that the affordability of the village, I look at that argument along the same lines as I look at the argument that the FPJ,
BFJ,
put forward on emergency services, and that is, it's going to have a marginal effect, but not one that, according to the report, not one that will have an incremental and meaningful impact. And I think that the same argument goes for the affordability of housing. It may have a marginal impact, but nothing that's going to have any sort of,
as we,
any sort of meaningful
right,
impact.
we need to move on because we're almost to 8 here, but
Yeah.
the governor's proposal last budget season was a proposal that was intended to build a 10% increase in housing units over the next decade in New York State.
Right.
That's 800,000 units, give or take, based on a current base of 8 million units.
But that was turned down. I mean,
So,
I
hear me
it's
out.
out there, but
Hear me out.
you're
Hear me
not
out.
convinced me that it's going to happen in Pleasantville.
Hear me out. The requirements were to create a benchmark that was 3% in a 3-year period, essentially 10% over 10 years.
Yeah, got it.
Complicated story there, but you're talking about a community, ours, that is already, based on our past decade of work,
Right.
achieved that goal. And as I have said in quite a few settings, including in Albany, if every community had been successful in achieving what we have achieved, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So give us some credit. Get off my back.
But
That said, there isn't any
some
question,
cost, so I mean,
Right.
it's already happened. I mean, I get that. I mean, for credit, okay.
but it hasn't happened.
From that
statewide.
perspective, I give you credit. I give.
Right, but it hasn't happened statewide, and so there's heavy pressure, and I mean, that same pressure is going on. There are already laws more draconian in this regard in both Connecticut and New Jersey than we have here in New York State. So it's just something we're obligated as a board to keep our eye on.
Yeah.
And it's not as though we're zoning defensively, but we're also thinking about what's coming at us, and we're also thinking about the role we can play, and honestly have played, in addressing some of these concerns. Totally right. What happens in the village of Pleasantville is not moving the needle on regional affordability, but we do what we can do.
Yeah, and I will just add one little piece, which is that I do think that we're all.
I mean, if we were, 1 second.
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned it. And I know where we're talking about, but again, now is the time to think about moving if that's your concern, the affordability quotient from 10% to 15%. I mean, if that's the concern, that's something you can do right now under the moratorium that may not be as impactful as the eliminating the bonus FAR, but nonetheless would get at the concerns that all 3 of you now have expressed. I don't understand we're not doing
But
But really-
the thing is that, Jonathan, I think that actually we'll end up with fewer. I think that there's an argument to be made that we'll end up with fewer affordable housing units if we do that than if we just leave things the way that they are. Because
because we slow down development.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
thank you.
Yeah.
But again,
so-
if that's your Trojan horse, you know, you
It's
just
not my
kind of
Trojan horse.
belabor.
I'm just saying that.
But then it's just sort of somewhat hypocritical to say that,
It-
you
it-
know, you're doing it.
I'm not being hypocritical. I want to slow
No, I
down
don't think you
development.
are.
That's what I want to do. And if I
I
can
mean,
do
you
that
would
by,
be-
if I can do that by fulfilling your guys' goal of having more affordable housing. Albeit, I don't disagree with you. There is some scenario I'm sure you can concoct where all of a sudden, the fact that I got to add one more affordable unit, I'm not doing my project at 444 somewhere else. Or one of these other locations, which I sincerely, I have to be convinced of that. I don't think that that's the marginal decision as to whether to do a project or not. But nonetheless, the village gets something out of it that's concurrent with which is aligned with the goals that you
Okay,
guys see.
but if you want,
Yeah, and
I totally get that. Believe me, we've had this conversation. I will tell you, and I've had this conversation in many places, with many places that have raised that number, have also provided a reduced number of required affordable units if those units are affordable at a lower percentage of the average median income. So whatever, give us 15% at 10% AMI, give us 8% at 60% MI, whatever it might be.
You can be fluid in that.
All kinds of ways to do that. But if you provided the best argument of all for why it's a concern of ours that may not achieve the goal we talk about in the realm of affordable housing, because as you rightly proposed, you think it would slow down development. So
Well, I
I think
think
it could.
we'll look into that issue too, but
Totally.
I'm not willing to make a vote on that until I have all the information, right? Like, I feel like, I mean, my background is in that.
And by slowing, just to be clear, I don't need to
Yeah.
cut you off, but by slowing, I mean, instead of having 120 units, which is, or 50 to 60, or whatever it is that the somewhere in between 50 to 60 and 120, which is what the
where?
report suggests is possible in the next 10 years. We're at the lower end of that, or we're in the middle and not at the higher end. I'm not saying we won't have any growth. I'm just saying you slow it, that's all.
Right, but
You've been
And by slowing
I just
it,
need
what do
more
what do you do with the properties that are then moribund or trapped or problematic, right?
But
So,
look, I'm
right,
willing to look into that possibility, but as with pretty much anything I do, any vote I take here, like, I need the research, you know what I mean? Like, I need all the information. I'm not just gonna make a decision like that off the cuff, and we haven't had any kind of research done into that issue specifically, but I.
and we've
I think
all
I do
collectively
think
agreed to do it, the affordability. issue.
Yeah,
Okay.
So we got to move on. I appreciate and we'll continue to appreciate your engagement on this subject.
Sure.
I'm waiting for your response about the piece about the
Yeah, I
police services.
I gotta get to
Yeah,
that.
I'm all
I
ears.
just got done with
All right,
4,000
you've got a lot-
folks at the Pleasant Music
you got a lot going on, I know.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
appreciate that. But, you know, I think what you're hearing here is we have quite a bit of data, but, and we want and intend to engage the community, you and everybody else, to the extent that they wish to be heard. We're not at the moment on the cusp of some explosion of stuff. So we've got some time to think about it.
but you can keep coming and keep us honest, Jonathan.
Yeah.
And then we get to hang out with you. So-
Mayor already knows this, bring back if you want a vibrant downtown, bring back the curbside dining at Soul Brewing and any other eatery.
Okay, which
That's out
eateries,
there.
and first off, the
Bring it
board
back.
collectively.
After Con Edison's done,
Right, the reason Seoul doesn't have theirs back is because of Con Edison.
when it's back.
We're waiting
bring it
for
back.
Con Edison to finish that, and we've already said we're gonna bring it back.
Oh,
Have
yeah.
you already?
Oh, I thought you said we're not bringing it back.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
I
my bad.
have concerns about it.
Okay.
And it's not that I don't think it's a great
He's
thing.
the outlier.
It's a plain old fairness issue. And I can tell you, I'm already getting flack
That's why
about
we need the younger generation.
similar conditions in other places that other people find problematic. So as it turns out,
I
yeah,
get it. There's always those people, but
that's the
nonetheless.
thing. See, the beauty of your position, Jonathan, as
And I love it,
as an esteemed alum of the board,
right.
is that you don't have to listen to the diverse opinion, only to your own. but I signed on for-
I have to dispel
I don't know
that
if I would
though,
take that, Jonathan.
because it's not like I hide and people find me and I hear all sorts of opinions. all
I
the
have
time.
no doubt that you do, and
No.
I've seen it happen.
So do we have to move to the regular
All right.
meeting
Yes, we
and
do.
then postpone the rest?
I hope
Thank you,
you'll
guys.
stay. We have exciting resolutions.
Oh,
It
what?
might give you PTSD of your past life.
Should I stay around and keep going?
I'm gonna actually move on, but so thank you
All right.
very much for having a quorum.
All right. Thank you, David. David is on with severe jet lag.
Oh,
All right,
Hi, David.
Right.
we are ending our work session for the Village of Pleasantville. Today is Monday, July 24th, and we're now beginning our regular session for the Village Board of Trustees. Welcome to our regular session. Today is Monday, July 24. I have a few announcements to make, and then we have a list of pretty routine agenda items. It's three of us tonight, Paul, myself, and Nicole. David Vinjamori is severely jet lagged, joined us for our work session conversation on the moratorium, but has departed, and Michael Peppard is unavailable tonight. So with that, let me just make a few announcements. The first was a shout out again. I mentioned at the last meeting, but our music festival was a tough day with some complicated weather. It was one of those days that Pleasantville can be proud of amid the struggles. Alyssa here has aged 15 years, and in the couple of weeks since has returned to her normal age. Thank you, Alyssa. You are at the crosshairs of a lot of the music festival stuff, and here in year 2 of your life as a music festival being, your service was widely complimented by everybody who had anything to do with you. So thank you very much.
Very well.
Also a shout out to Eric Marcy. He's not here tonight, also on vacation this week, but same for Eric. People somehow imagine that the government of the Village of Pleasantville has a staff of many, and in fact, a lot of all of this falls upon 2 folks, Eric and Alyssa, and at a season when there's all kinds of other stuff to do, it's much appreciated that you rise to the occasion and you do so with such good spirit. So a couple of other things to mention. Con Edison continues through their contractor the work of replacing the gas main on Wheeler and around the corner on Bedford. The gas main part is now finished, and they are working building by building, digging up the road from the gas main across this under the sidewalk to each building to replace the gas main service to each building. So that work is ongoing. It's taking a while, but I think within hopefully a month or so, we're expecting that to be done. We're also expecting within the next month or so to have our contractor back on the Menville Road project. That project has been mostly constructed, the increased width of the sidewalks and the bump outs from Tompkins down to Wheeler. We have temporary paving, striping in place there. When the whole project is done, all of Manville from Tompkins to Grant will be milled and completely repaved. But for the moment, we're in an interim condition. They stopped at Wheeler, and the section from Wheeler to Grant is awaiting the arrival of the equipment for the traffic signals. That's a long lead time. It's been ordered months and months ago. We're expecting all that to get rocking and rolling again sometime in August. So you'll see that work kick up. Included in that work is closing the so-called elbow slip lane out of the commuter side of the Memorial Plaza lot, and the construction of a right turn only lane in between Valvoline and the War Monuments. That's going to involve what will initially appear to be a very substantial loss of trees, because we're going to have to build a retaining wall adjacent to the memorials. When all is said and done, we'll be replacing more trees than are taken down. And at a future meeting, we'll give folks a little preview of the landscape work that our landscape architect Wagner Hodgson has worked on for the improved condition when the slip lane is closed and we're able to create a more park-like setting in that L-shaped area. We will maintain parking in the north end of Memorial Plaza, but that piece from the railroad overpass up to the north end will become a dead end 2-way route. So you'll pull up, park, and come back the same way to get out. More on that as it develops. Our pool project inches along. We had a year ago hoped we might be talking about a reconstruction beginning this fall. Now we're a reconstruction beginning next fall. The problem being even a short delay pushes us to the next building season. But shout out to everybody who joined the pool. Very much appreciated. We've been having a good pool season, and the weather has done a good job of making it desirable to be in water instead of out of it. A couple of other things I wanted to mention, one of which I think I mentioned in the past, but on August 3rd at the Jacob Burns Film Center, they are showing a documentary called Odd Hours, No Pay, Cool Hat. And it's a movie about volunteer firefighters. It's an event that is co-sponsored by our own volunteer fire department and our ambulance corps. And it's followed by a Q&A with one of the producers and casting directors of the movie. So tickets are available for that at burnsfilmcenter.org. Again, it's August 3rd, and I really encourage folks to come and see it, both what is inevitably going to be an interesting movie, but also an opportunity to recognize our own first responders who are co-sponsors of this event. In the same category, there is a blood drive that takes place this Thursday, a few days from today. That's Thursday, July 27. That takes place at the Pleasantville Firehouse. They prefer that you make an appointment, but walk-ins are accepted if space permits. To make an appointment, you can call 800-933-2566. That's 800-933-2566 to make an appointment for the blood drive Thursday, July 27, taking place at the fire headquarters. And then the last thing I had on my list to mention is the county has put out quite a bit of material and will be providing quite a bit more material about the ongoing problem with lithium-ion battery fires. So lithium-ion batteries are increasingly appearing in e-bikes, scooters, hoverboards, laptops, and some electric lawn equipment and drones. And the fires, if they erupt into a fire, are extremely difficult to put out. So it's all a manageable problem. But Westchester is considering legislation requiring point of sale warnings and safety information, requiring that devices meet UL standards. There are some devices that you can buy online or elsewhere that are of uncertain origin, and also a prohibition on the sale of reassembled or damaged batteries. I think the most important piece for all of us to realize is that lithium-ion batteries are a potential fire hazard, just like batteries in general, and it's something to have on everybody's radar screen. We'll have more on that as it develops. Anybody else? If anyone listening online has a question or a comment, nobody here in the room. Any comments from the public of any sort, raise your hand in the chat. There being none, let me share my screen and we will go to the resolutions. Okay. Resolution 261, Paul.
Result that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the minutes for the regular meeting held on July 10th, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's going to be a tag team here. So,
Yeah.
comments or corrections to the
Let's
minutes?
keep going back and forth.
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. 262, Nicole.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the following budget amendments for fiscal year ending in 2023, effective May 31st, 2023, is listed below. Decrease of revenue and expense of the general fund, a decrease of $68,736.91. The Pleasantville Strong Drug-Free Community Revenue. So there's $9,562.50 from Pleasantville Strong Drug-Free Community Conferences, $6,551.81 from supplies, $1,628.85 for miscellaneous, $50,993.75 from OS expense, and then none for social security, Medicare, or PT expense.
Is there a second?
Second.
So just to remind folks, the village is the fiscal agent for this federal grant that funds Pleasantville Strong. But $250,000 a year comes into the village coffers specific for this program. And then the monies are expended consistent with the decisions of the Pleasantville Strong Steering Committee. So the dollars expended here are federal grant dollars, not local tax dollars.
And this is just shifting it from one fiscal year to the next, right?
Right. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. All 263.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the following budget amendments for fiscal year 2024 as listed below. 68,736.91 from a 0.444401 DFC P.O. Strong drug-free community revenue. It's going over to 0 for drug-free community PT expense, $9,562.50 for a 4050.403 DFC P.O. Strong drug-free community conferences, $6,551.81 for a 450.406 DFC Pleasantville Strong drug-free community supplies, $1,628.85 for miscellaneous, same category, but miscellaneous. $50,993.75 for a 450.425 for Pleasantville Strong for the OS expense. $0 for the Social Security, $0 for Medicare.
Is there a second?
Second, there's
there's more.
another piece.
Yeah. Increase.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Increase revenue and expense capital fund. 70,000 from H 50.5031, the internal fund transfer from general fund to capital sidewalk project fiscal year 2024, H 5410.201-24490, 300,000 from H 505031 interfund transfer from general fund to street resurfacing project fiscal year 2024, H 5410 period 201-24491 for a total of 370,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
So two pieces to say there again. The first part of this was the parallel budget amendment to the one Nicole had read. Our village fiscal year ends on May 31st and a new one begins on June 1. And so in the case of an entity like Pleasantville Strong that has a calendar year budget, what you didn't spend up until May has to get moved into the budget for the fiscal year ending 2024, even if the accounting for Pleasantville Strong ends December 31. And then the second piece of this, which is village funds, represents the work we're doing now with sidewalks and street resurfacing, all within the original budget.
Yes, it was all budgeted for.
And you can see what's going on right now. Actually, our paving contractor got here a little earlier than expected, and paving is going on in quite a few places right now. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. 264, Nicole.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the abstract for payment of claims dated July 24th, 2023 for fiscal year ending in 2023, covering check numbers 108091 to 108104. From the general fund, $13,440.85. From the special fund, $2,862. From the water fund, $9,375.01. From the capital fund, $244,215.25. From the refuse fund, $59.70 for a total of $269,952.81. The payment of claims is attached.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments, questions about the payment of claims?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. 265.
Result, the Board of Trustees hereby approves the abstract for payment claims dated July 24, 2023 for the fiscal year of 2024, covering check numbers 107964 through 108090 and 108105. General fund, $473,558.88. Special, $150. Water fund, $44,742.17. Capital, $26,064.06. Refuse fund, $25,627.36. for a total of $570,142.47.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments or questions on the FYE 2024 claims? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved 266.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the following revised stipends for services performed in support of the 2023 Pleasantville Music Festival. Bruce Figler, Executive Director, $10,000. Andrew Goodman, Marketing Web Field Operations, $1,500. Pamela Condren, Hospitality Artist Relations Party, $275. Andrew Sullivan, Sponsorship Marketing, $1,500. Carolyn Beal, Volunteer Coordinator, $1,000. Abby Wright, Public Relations, $500. Marie Graham, Vendor Coordinator, $1,000. Stuart Vance Designs, Design Director, $1,500. Jeffrey Schreider, Stage, $538.98. Jonathan Cunningham, Photography Leader, $150. Vanessa Perkins, Security, $150. Michael Krasansky, Security, $150. Bridget Egan, Zero Waste, $150. Stephanie L, Zero Waste, $150. Edwin Quo, Zero Waste, $150. Helen Muir, Zero Waste, $150. Karen Horowitz, Zero Waste, $150. Sophie Worley, Stage, $150. Glenn Quadvilig, Stage, $150. James Zimmerman, Stage, $150. James Payton, Stage, $150. Peter Rogovan, Tent City Coordinator, $150. And Chloe Peters, Face Painting Coordinator, $150, for a total of $19,913.38.
Is there a second?
Second.
These are similar to what we've done in the past. These are sort of the core folks who devote a lot of time, not only that day, but in leading up to it for the music festival. Comments, questions? All in favor? Aye. Motion approved. Thank you all. 267.
I'm up. Yep.
Yeah.
Result, the Board of Trustees hereby accepts the resignation from School Crossing Guard Thomas Royman, effective June 24th, 2023. His resignation letter attached to this resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sarah, for your assistance. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. 268.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the request from Karen Duke, 32 Saratoga Avenue, to hold a block party on October 7th, 2023, with a rain date of October 8th, 2023, and thereby close Saratoga Avenue from Columbus Avenue to the intersection of Daniel Place, and from Garrican Avenue from Madison Avenue to Saratoga Avenue from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments? Will you be there?
I will try to. I have not gotten the invite, but they're down the street from my
I
house.
was gonna say yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Have a good time. Back to you, Paul, 269.
Resolved, the Board of Trustees hereby accepts the resignation of School Crossing Guard Peter Basha, effective June 22nd, 2018.
Is there a second?
Second, are we going to have enough crossing guards for the fall?
Yes, that's why we are removing people so that we can rehire. Our roster was full with the county.
Oh, good.
So
So yeah, because this is an old one, I see 2018,
we're
right?
trying to clear up.
Oh, right.
Right, this is clearing up.
Oh, I see.
All in
Okay.
favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. You would think that the county would get involved in how many cross guards we have, but they do.
Yeah.
270.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby accepts the resignation from School Crossing Guard Jeanette Andre, effective July 31st, 2021.
Is there a second? Okay. Same story there. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. 271, Paul. All right.
There's an estimate there.
Resolved, the Village Board of Trustees hereby authorize the village administrator to sign the fee exempt application for the Clinton Street Center's renewal of food service establishment permit with Westchester County Department of Health for the period of October 1st, 2023 through September 30th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Straightforward annual event. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. 272.
Resolved that the
Nicole.
Board of Trustees hereby authorizes Recreation Superintendent to hold the annual Ragamuffin Parade on Bedford Road and Festival in Memorial Plaza on Sunday, October 22nd, 2023 at 12 p.m. and a rain date of October 29th, 2023, and therefore close Academy Street from 11:30 a.m. to 12:45 p.m. and close Bedford Road at 12:30 p.m. Doesn't say until when, but. And further resolved that the Board of Trustees authorizes the police chief to post no parking signs in the Memorial Plaza parking lot in advance of the event and to tow all vehicles in violation of this temporary parking restriction.
Is there a second?
Second.
Following the prototype for last year, the Ragamuffin Parade on Sunday instead of Saturday avoided conflict with a bunch of activities and the farm market. All in favor?
It should probably be amended to have a closing time for Bedford Road.
I
I'm
will
guessing.
find out. what that
Okay.
is, and I'll update it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. 273, Paul.
Result, the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes Recreation Superintendent to hold the annual holiday lighting ceremony at the intersection of Great Oak Lane and Manville Road on Wednesday, November 29, 2023 at 7 p.m. and the rain date of Thursday, November 30th, 2023, and therefore close Edgewood Avenue between Great Oak Lane and Wilton Road, 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. in Manville Road between Great Oak Lane and Brookfield Place between 6:30 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. and post no parking signs on Great Oak Lane and Brookfield Place. And further resolve that the Board of Trustees authorize the police chief to post no parking signs in advance of the event and to tow all vehicles in violation of this temporary parking restriction.
Is there a second?
Second.
So two things to add to your calendar.
I'm
The
not
rag-
ready to think about the.
The Ragamuffin Parade on October 22 and the lighting ceremony on November 29. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. 274, Nicole.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees, in support of the Pleasantville Chamber of Commerce, hereby authorizes the community block party to be held on September 23rd, 2023, with a rain date of September 30th, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
Shout out to Paul.
So we had an October and a November. We needed a September. This is it.
There you go.
The block party, September 23. All in favor? Aye,
There's
motion
a
approved.
typo, I don't know if you want.
Which one was it?
Well, authorize needs an S.
Hereby authorizes. Okay.
All right.
I think the mover and the seconder would accept that.
Yes,
Yeah.
we
All
indeed.
in favor is aye.
Aye.
275, Paul.
Result that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village administrator to sign a special event permit application from the New York State Liquor Authority for the Pleasantville Chamber of Commerce Community Block Party.
Is there a second?
Second.
That's a required step in order to have any outdoor sales. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. 276, Nicole.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village administrator or superintendent of public works to sign the Make Ready program agreement with Con Edison for the placement of an electric vehicle charging station in the Wheeler Avenue parking lot.
Is there a second?
Second.
That sets us up for the potential to have electric vehicles in our village fleet. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. 277, Paul.
Result that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the hiring of Ione Gata, school crossing guard, job code 141 at the hourly rate of $22 with an effective date of August 14, 2023. Said appointment is subject to a probationary period of not less than 12 weeks to a maximum of 52 weeks.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Welcome. Glad to have you. 278. Nicole, bring us home.
Resolved that the village Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the creation of a capital account for improvements to the north end of Memorial Plaza.
Is there a second? That's you, Paul.
Sorry, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. That was the end of our resolutions, and that is the end of our regular session agenda. We're going to return to work session, a few more items, and then we have a brief executive session. Again, any comments from any member of the public or an attendee via Zoom? There being none, let me just report that our next regular meeting is Monday, the 14th of September. I'm sorry, of August. I'm missing a month. Monday, the 14th of August at 7 p.m. with a work session at 7, regular meeting at 8. As is always the case, you can pick up this meeting and past ones at pcctv76.org. Thank you all and good night. Is there a motion to depart the regular meeting, to go back to work session, and then to enter a brief executive session on matters of real estate?
So
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you all. All right, so we stay live on Zoom, but Paul, you wanted to chat about the issue of the
let's just make sure we don't forget the parking.
Yeah,
Okay, well, let's do that first.
yeah, was it the parking or the, yeah,
The parking thing, which generated a comment that I.
yeah, I did
circulated.
receive, yep,
The idea there is, we currently have essentially the same kiosks in both parking lots, but the one in the Bedford Road lot dispenses a chip that you have to display on your dashboard and go back to your car. On Memorial Plaza, you type in your license plate number and you don't have to go back.
correct.
And so the idea was to convert this one, which is a no-cost change.
Correct.
The device can run either way, so that the one at Bedford Road did the same thing, and you wouldn't then have to go back to your car. And then the template would be the same in either parking lot. So that strikes me as a logical thing to do. We had one correspondent who does not like the idea, as you saw.
Yep, I mean, I think that generally this is the way most cities and municipalities have it. The old, you have to bring it back to your car. It's not, you don't see that often. Most people are also using apps anyway.
Which is also an option here.
Which is what we have
Yes.
already. So I know that we had one of our constituents who was concerned about like a privacy issue.
Yes.
Essentially, you're giving your license plate, but you're giving your license plate already to the Department of Motor Vehicles. This is something that kind of goes with the territory of driving a car, parking a car. You also don't need to, if you don't want to park there, you could park in a kind of place where you can put coins, which we still have, right?
Yes, at Memorial Plaza, if you didn't want to use this device just on the other side of the median, you can park it at meters.
So for those reasons, plus I also know just people's nature. There's a lot of people that if they're just running to get a sandwich, the idea of having to run, pay, grab a paper, put it back in, run back out is enough for them not to pay. And so I think it discourages that just because that extra walk back to their car.
Right, it's.
Isn't it? Exactly. So I think that this is the most logical and reasonable thing to do. So
Can
I'm.
you use Django if you're there instead of? the-
You can use Pango anywhere.
Okay,
Again, if your concern is who has the information about where you parked and when, you wouldn't use Pango either, because obviously it's going to a third party. It's interesting, I noticed in Manhattan, I was in Brooklyn for a client a couple of weeks ago, at a location I've parked before on the street, where you go down the street to the box and get a chit, and it has been taken out of service and you have to use the app.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know what you do if you don't have a smartphone, but
I don't love the license plate thing, but I think it makes sense to have it be consistent. I
Well,
think
and-
it's confusing if it's one way.
I mean, and there's no alternative to one or the other, right?
Right,
So,
Right.
all right,
But don't you still somewhat, so right now you don't put anything in anywhere. You don't put like, if you're doing it the way that we have it set up and printed it, what do you print in just your own?
you can print a receipt
And you're
if you just want a receipt, but you don't have to put it back in the car
right.
over in Memorial Plaza. At Bedford Road, it prints the receipt and you have to put it on the dashboard, because that's the evidence that you paid. So when the parking enforcement person comes to Bedford Road, they're simply looking for the chits on the dashboard. When they come to Memorial Plaza, she's downloading the list of cars who's paid and can scan as she goes by and find the ones that, you scan the plate, big, pay, no problem.
But isn't that also more effective to our parking meter maid or whoever?
Yes.
To use that system altogether?
Yeah, well, and I can also tell you in the case of people who get a ticket and are angry about it and come to the judge, they say, I bought it and I forgot to put this chit in, or I had the chit in and she didn't see it, or it slipped into the defroster, or,
Or that it didn't print it out. That's like, I didn't get a print out of it, I did pay it,
That's a big one we have.
so there's so many different things.
because the machine jams or.
Yeah, something like that, or, yeah, I mean, I think that for all those reasons, I think it just makes more sense to.
I do too. I mean, I certainly understand the big brother question. But that was a huge issue for many people when Easy Pass came out,
Right,
because now some entity has a list of where you went and when you did it, crossing bridges, going through toll booths, et cetera. And I certainly understand the concern people had. I think in this case, the information that our third-party provider who provides the software for the meter gizmos, it's pretty straightforward stuff, and in fact, it's the primary provider of these services in Westchester County. I see the same gizmos in other.
Correct. And not only that, but the way that this is supposed to work at its maximum is that you're able to check the app of where there's parking available. So if people are using it,
Well, that doesn't connect to this.
so wouldn't that
Right.
tell people that
At some point, it could conceivably, but the gizmo just knows in the license plate scheme, it basically says you're parked somewhere in this lot. Presumably, at some point, it could say, well, there are X number of spaces,
what I
hypothetically,
thought,
spaces and 70 people have parked here. What it doesn't account for in our case is how many permit people are there, because they don't have to go to the device, so.
okay. But that's I have realized some apps have that.
Yeah.
Where you're
Yes.
like, I'm not even gonna try that lot because there's no spots available.
Yeah,
You
so
can see it
we're not
before you
quite that
pull in
fancy
lot.
yet, but
Okay.
again, it's all going there,
It's right, it's in
Yeah.
that direction.
but it will,
I use these a lot in courts when I go, so they're very consistent.
Yeah. well, and now some like big parking garages and hotels and things. Literally, there's an LED sign that says, 7 spaces remaining
Right,
as you enter a given floor.
exactly. Yep.
We're not quite there yet, so all right,
Okay,
I think we have a
Agreed.
consensus to do it.
So then my question for you guys is, when do you want to start it? I think it would be good to give people.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should put out an e-blast that we're gonna do it, and why don't we start it September 1 or something?
Okay.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
I think so, more than a 30-day notice. And then do we announce it into a resolution at the next meeting to put it into effect in September?
Do we even need a resolution? I mean, we're not changing the rates, right?
You were not changing.
Oh,
It's
so we
just an operational thing, I think.
Okay,
We can do one just for the transparency of it to have it there, but we're not changing
okay,
anything.
All right, there's that.
okay.
All right,
So, just a discussion on the block party. So last year, just give a little recap of where we're going with this conversation. So the first year that we had this event, it was new. We didn't really know what was happening. It was also during the time of COVID. So we were kind of limited with our planning because Westchester County wasn't going to give us our pass to do it. It was all based on they were going to look at the numbers. So it was kind of a floating idea. Then we had some people coming, and then I think within the last 3 weeks we got the go. Okay, so it's very quickly done. At that time, we had a few vendors, very small, and we essentially just planned the event. We didn't get nobody was selling, so we didn't have any food vendors or anything. It was just and it was just on Wheeler Avenue, so any of the restaurants right now that were there could sell their food, and some people were eating it outside. Now Soul, it was one of their, I think they had maybe been there for only a year. They were packed, and essentially people were buying drinks and just kind of walking either across or walking down the street a little bit. But essentially, most people were contained in the area. I would say probably between right in front of Soul down to about, I guess you could say down to about the Black Cat. Is where most people, if they were drinking, were. We had some tables there. We had some tables on top, so that just kind of just happened as it was. So we didn't plan on it. We didn't know, and it was a really good weather day, so a lot of people came. It was a Saturday, so that's what ended up happening. The event, I think I remember it happened from about 1 o'clock to 6 or so, and then kind of fizzled out. Some people stayed around, and then it got more in front of Soul because we had music there. So that event taught us that, this was an event that if we closed Wheeler Avenue, people could kind of go out and about. For last year, we wanted to have more control because that was something that we didn't anticipate. We didn't make any changes in the open container law or anything on Wheeler Avenue. So last year we implemented that we would designate an area for open container, which would be in the parking lot behind the Holy Innocents and essentially behind Wheeler Avenue, between Holy Innocents and Wheeler Avenue. That area was designated the Block Party Beer Garden and it was supposed to be the food area for any vendors that are not on Wheeler or Washington Avenue. They could bring their food there. So we had, for example, Foley's was there. Southern Table was there. I think those were the two other food establishments that were there mainly. So the event, because it ended up being really bad weather that weekend, the rain date, we made it for Sunday. And the weather wasn't much better. I mean, it didn't rain, but it was just cold. It looked like it was gonna rain the whole time. So we had a low turnout for that part of this
They did, the
event.
beer garden was quiet.
Very quiet, yeah. But
There was a stage back there and.
there was a stage, we had music, and there was a little people that went. The kids area that was in front of, right here, Village Hall essentially, was very packed. A lot of people still came out with their kids, because like I said, it wasn't raining, it was just cold. So that was still going. We did still get some vendors pulled out, some stayed. And on Washington Avenue, the car show went well, because most of the people did show up. And so, that didn't really phase anything. So the question is that I bring into the board is to having a discussion as to, I've looked at other villages, and I've also communicated with village administrator to communicate with other villages or municipalities as to how they have bigger roads or bigger areas that they designate as, an area where they'll waive the open container law. So, for example, in Tarrytown essentially, they permit alcohol sales and consumption at their annual Halloween parade. But it's restricted to a defined area. So, people of drinking age are given bracelets. And, they try their best to contain that area. Obviously, some people may walk away with cups to different areas, but that's, I think the main thing here is what's the defined area? So for us, if we're going to define the area of what I would want to close, well, I would want to say, the open container, we know they would be real at. So it would just be that area. If that was the case, then we wouldn't utilize the parking lot really anymore.
Oh, so you would get rid of the
I would,
parking lot?
yeah, I would get rid of that and just have essentially just Wheeler Avenue, because then essentially there's different stores, restaurants that do sell alcohol that they could sell it right outside in tables, or people can get it and go into tables in the middle. So it opens up that area essentially, and the defined area would be Wheeler Avenue from Washington Avenue to Bedford Road. Now, we could even define it more if we wanted to block off, let's say, right where Soul starts, going back towards Washington Avenue to make it more defined.
You probably wouldn't want to include the kids zone, would you?
Well, so that was the question I've been talking. I imagine that's also why Alan from Soul was here. He had discussions with people in general, and he said that he could even get support from signatures from families in Pleasantville that essentially, they didn't see, a lot of parents like the idea of being able to be around their kids, but if they want to, have a beer or something in their hand, it doesn't impact them. And in other events where these things happen, generally that does happen, and essentially, they're surrounded in that area where there can be some alcohol in the area, even if you go to a restaurant or any place. So it's kind of all over. But if that became a concern, then maybe that could be the part that kind of gets secluded. But I guess the main starting point would be to discussing as to if we could do something where we waive the open container law on Wheeler Avenue, at least defining that it would only be Wheeler Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there defining how long of the stretch of Wheeler Avenue. Now, to give you just also a comparison to that, the Mount Pleasant Chamber of Commerce is doing essentially an event like the event we're doing. I forgot what day they're doing, but there's actually, Mayor Scherer sent this to me on June 13th. They passed a resolution that essentially lifted the open container law, and in their area, or I guess a defined area that they have, just to give you a point of reference, their area is from Commerce Street. So to give you an exact point, where the old Gordo's used to be. So if you're aware, if you can,
Which is reopening as
Yeah,
something new.
it's something new already reopened, yep. So where the old Gordo's used to be, which is right before the Hawthorne Street Station, to essentially all the way past where you would go up the hill, which is way past all the different stores, or let's just say, like kind of like where Pop's Deli is. So that stretch is about 0.3 miles.
What's the event?
It's essentially this, it's a Mount Pleasant Act.
Okay.
So, same kind of idea of event. A lot of our vendors that are coming here also go there. And so I've had questions from a lot of the vendors as to why, you know, how come this is so different and that they can't do something like that in Pleasantville and Wheeler, considering it's a more confined and defined area. Then that area that specifically, you know, opens it for such a large place. And they have the same kind of situation where they just have vendors from side to side. I think only one place there actually sells alcohol. So the rest of them are all vendors. For example, Stoll is one of the vendors that goes there. So that's what I'm essentially bringing up to the board to just have a discussion and essentially, you know, put this out there. And so I can also respond to my business constituents as to, you know, why our event is a certain way and why we couldn't try something different.
Okay.
So that's where I'm at.
So if we were to do that on Wheeler to Bedford or Wheeler to whatever.
I guess the parking lot when they come up.
Pharmacy or
Yeah.
something like that. Obviously Soul has a liquor license and would be selling out of their store and possibly also in a booth out front. Pub Street has not historically done this, although they could.
Yep.
There's no other purveyor of alcohol.
There's falafel,
Does he have a liquor license?
he does.
Well, Dolphin too.
Dolphin does as well.
Right.
And also,
Now Dolphin didn't participate last year, did they?
they did not, but I know this could change.
First year.
They did,
were
yeah. Also the sushi place, Miyabi, has a license.
Yeah,
Fat
Of
Root,
course, yes, right.
Fat Root
I'm
has a
missing them
license.
all. They almost all
Yeah,
do.
Fat Root has a license and they also now have more of a bar area and remember they have the
Yeah.
side part.
So, I mean, the hit on it, obviously, first off is you completely lose control. And there isn't an ID check system at all, except to the extent that the individual purveyor would ask for it. And once somebody buys it, even if there is an ID check, they can give it to whoever and
well, Paul's suggestion was that you would have a bracelet system.
Right.
Have you heard from other municipalities?
Well, that's what Tarrytown does. They give, when you go buy any kind of alcohol, you get ID. And then once you show your ID, you get a special bracelet.
at whichever place.
At whichever place you're gonna buy alcohol.
Wherever you started, and then that bracelet would apply if you bought it elsewhere.
Correct. And we would make sure that we gave out those bracelets to like specific bracelets that we have and can only be given out to the establishments that we know are participating in essentially selling alcohol.
Right,
So, you know, that's kind of how they do it essentially. Now, if you're seeing a young person that's holding, you know, some kind of, you know, drink or something, even if it's in a Yeti or something like that.
Mhm.
Essentially, if you see that they don't have a wristband, I think it would allow anyone to check like, hey, you know, what do you have in that drink kind of thing.
I mean, not that that's really likely to happen. If
Right,
you read the open container law, you can bring your own.
Right.
I guess.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. You could have a backpack, you can buy one drink, get your wristband and be pouring your own drinks. So you don't have to, you know, you don't have
If you
to
wait
buy.
the open container law, I do wonder what the letter of that law is. I think it's likely that you could be asked if you appear to be underage, but I don't know if you could require an ID check. I don't know, whatever. So the two sides of that argument, on the one hand, obviously, we've morphed to a world where restaurants and bar life are a very big piece of the Wheeler Avenue economy and the downtown. And one would want to support that. The flip side of it is essentially creating a large bar in a public space in a way that, you know, a generation ago wouldn't have been considered. I don't present that as a reason not to do it. It's just a different mindset. But you export to the public realm a alcohol driven event.
Yeah, I mean, I totally can see that being a view. However, I do think that just in my experience with having kids and going to different places, I go to Austin too, I go to a lot of different places. Most of these places have things for kids and essentially have an element that there is alcohol somewhere there. I can even give you examples of most. There's a place in Peekskill that's called Spins. It's like think of it like Sport Time USA, but like 10 times
May it
better.
rest in peace.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
But like 10 times better. But so that place is
Well,
a
I don't-
brewery.
Come on, don't
I'm
get
just saying,
started
like,
on it,
and what they have available, like you can literally rent for a kid's party. So the center of that place is a brewery. And everything around it, we're talking arcades, we're talking laser tag, we're talking, all these different games all around, and there's happens to be a brewery in the middle. And the same thing if you go to Captain Lawrence now. Captain Lawrence is hugely based on trying to provide a place that families can go. So now they have things for kids that are available. So I think you're 100% right in what you said in the beginning, where I think mentality, I think, is changing a bit into what the norm was and what's not. And I don't
No
think,
doubt.
and I don't think that, I think if we're setting it up as a family-based event, is essentially where we're not trying to have this be like an Oktoberfest where people are coming here just to, get wasted with their friends, kind of. It's more of a family base and trying that and having the actual people that will probably be there would be people that were there 2 years ago where this happened, and thank God we didn't have any incidents. We didn't have anything that
No,
I think people
yeah,
compose
yeah.
themselves well. I think people in our village, even there's been events that have been held, fundraisers that are held for different organizations, and I do think that, alcohol is involved. Now, obviously alcohol is a problem, but there's a reason why it's illegal if it's a consumption at a responsible rate. And that's the part that's I think has changed a bit, where it become more acceptable.
No doubt.
Now, and I don't think that
No doubt.
it makes us as the village say, hey, we're promoting drinking. I know it could look like that, but I do think that I'm promoting our businesses and what they sell. And also, at the same time, if these businesses already have their alcohol licenses and people are going to be drinking there, it's not going to change much if they just drink there and go walk around, kind of thing. Like, yes, they have to keep their drink there. So the only difference is more just having the ability to have people, for example, I put Michael playing his guitar down in Nona Park. But if, let's say, you want to have a beer with a friend, you're like, all right, we have to have a beer here. You stop it there, and then you go
He
over
was on
there.
the keyboard, wasn't
He was
he? He was on the keyboards.
Michael, but he wasn't on the guitar there. Okay, so but that's the idea. But also, it stops there, and if people want to go to Washington Avenue,
Again, so let me, again, I'm not necessarily opposed to this. I would assume that Pleasantville Strong would be opposed to it. And
I don't. I mean,
Right.
yes, I would imagine, but at the same time, I don't know what events they support, and what events they don't. I mean, we had a meeting with the person in charge of Pleasantville Strong, and it was about the businesses and just in general,
I
is
see.
how
yes,
they can promote Pleasantville Strong. So the meeting that we had is kind of how can we work together on
recent.
I think it was in the last 3 months or so. And so it was how can Pleasantville Strong come into businesses and essentially promote. So we talked about having more of, having businesses support signs that saying we don't support underage drinking. Holding everyone responsible to being aware of that and to working together, and that in reality, this is a responsibility that we all have. So the biggest concern, I think, for me with any young people is that if, an adult is giving them alcohol, which, that's incredibly hard. So I think that, I think if I worked with Pleasantville Strong and showing them, you know, they know that alcohol is something that people do, that adults do, that parents do. I mean, the games that happen, the football games, things like that have happened. So it's, I think it's difficult to say that.
We're not gonna start ratifying that.
Right, so I don't know how we can solve that part, but I
We
do
can't
think.
solve it, it's just, it's a little collision and
Right.
different people have different views. I
But
will
most
say,
of these events and fundraisers that happen to support a lot of the booster clubs in Pleasantville are almost all in some kind of way involved with alcohol sales.
But usually without
without
kids
kids,
present. Yeah, so I'll say a couple things. One is, first of all, like, I understand your desire to move it, to centralize the event more around Wheeler. I think that makes sense. I think that I can see why that, like, separation of the separate beer garden area
yeah,
felt
just
awkward
people didn't
and
get it, and honestly, it
and
wasn't even
didn't
just a
really
wet,
work.
right?
Yeah,
so-
they don't wanna leave their,
I totally get that. And I also get the, like, the parental conundrum, right? When your kids are younger, right? Because you have to, like, you can't just let your kids go off, you know? But you don't want it to be just about the kid. One thing I wonder, this is maybe in addition to what you're proposing, is whether we could have more seating areas.
yeah,
Because, like, as opposed to just having, you know, people necessarily like standing around consuming alcohol, it's nice to involve food, first of all, as well. So I
absolutely.
was wondering if we could have, if we shut down Wheeler, more seating areas, that could be general seating areas that weren't
Which is nice.
necessarily proprietary to any
Just-
individual
Yeah,
restaurant.
I think that's good.
Last year we had 2 sections like that we had, and the first year we also had, like, I think it was 4 tables that we put out, but we definitely put more tables.
I think more would be
Yeah,
good.
and they
I
would-
mean, again, it's not a huge number, it just increases our cost, we rent them and they DPW
Yeah,
knock
of
them
course,
down at
that's
the end of the
true.
night.
Yeah.
I think we
Yeah.
should, I totally agree. So I guess the question,
But like, for
Is it-
example, when last year, we budgeted to confine that area to have like essentially security, like kind of keeping people in that area.
Mhm.
I think cost us in budget like $2,000. So, you know, we could take that budget and if we need to help the, you know, with getting tables or
Yeah,
things
yeah,
like that, we
right.
can kind of share
Making
more.
the area a little bit.
Yeah,
will
is it
help
crazy to imagine putting the kids zone in the parking lot?
Well, I think that the issue is you're separating. And then the idea is to try to keep everyone.
Yeah.
It makes it difficult for the parents.
So, I mean, I've certainly, and maybe it's kind of Pleasantville Strong meetings, sort of over the years. The concern that over time, kids from a very young age get the idea that social life equals alcohol. And that every social engagement involves people drinking.
Yeah,
And the result of that is by the time you're 15, it's so central to everything that you become a drinker at a younger age than many folks think is reasonable. Whether all that is, you know, is that the cause and the effect, or is that a cultural evolution? Is that something we can do something about or not? You know, I think that historically the SLA laws, which said you can't let your patrons take liquor outside of a bar or restaurant, was based on the idea that you, the license holder, are responsible for not over serving someone and for not allowing a raucous scene to evolve out into the street. And we certainly have had some raucous scenes evolving into street, not related to the block party. And that's not that kind of event. I will say it's interesting in case of Mount Pleasant, where it's such a long thing that kind of probably dilutes the intensity of the thing because it's across such a long space, right?
well, I wonder also, I mean, I don't know if this.
I
is
mean,
something
a lot of
you
people
can
stay in the
regulate,
middle.
But I wonder about like what kind of alcohol would be served. I don't know if this is something that's even worth bringing into the conversation, but I'm trying to think of like
Well, so that's a great
comparable
question.
scenes
So,
that I've experienced in my
So-
life, and I feel like there's a difference between like beer being served in that kind of context than, you
right,
know,
so
hard
we,
alcohol.
right, so we know Soul would be just selling beer.
Yeah,
I believe that Falafel Tacos just sells beer. Generally, yeah, I don't know that they drinks. Obviously, the other restaurants that are inside, they have drinks if you go
Right,
and
right,
you,
right.
and you know, but maybe we can limit their ability, like, they're not gonna, essentially, don't allow those places to do go-to cups of like, let's say, you know, a margarita. Like,
Right, right.
You're gonna have margarita, you have it.
So, but it's hard, I don't think I mean, SLA
That's possible.
has permitted now the sale of to-go drinks in ways that are involved in the pandemic, and some piece of it remains. I don't really know exactly what the.
Yeah, I mean, I guess,
But
but
you can sell a margarita and a snap top
Yeah.
now that you couldn't before,
yeah,
right?
I mean, that part is stuff, but I think overall, I'm thinking of what people would be drinking. I think more, and what I saw last time is more people just drinking beers. Now, I wouldn't have anyone that's a vendor, like, let's say Lucy's decides to do it because they want to be more involved and they're kind of in the outline. Like, I wouldn't have them come and be selling, you know, shots to people. Like that just, I would be like, we're not doing it.
Jello shots.
Yeah,
and
like, you
beer
know,
pong.
Yeah, so you know, I wouldn't do things like that, but I think,
Delta Kappa Epsilon booth, you know?
Yeah. that was a T. That was a top cup absolutely.
Oh, sorry,
That's what I was.
I see.
But so,
I should have known.
yeah, right.
No ring, I don't see a ring.
I've got other ways to put
I see.
it. So, I don't know. So that's, you know, I'd love to obviously also hear, I think, you know, your input is incredibly valuable. I love to hear from David and also from, I think Michael would also, I think, have a lot to say on this, because Michael does, you know, go to a lot of events. He also has, you know, a daughter that's right in high school as we speak. So I do think that, but I think it's something that should be at least explored as to like,
Yeah, I understand, right? We're trying to have a successful event. I agree with you that the parking lot thing didn't work out the way people hoped. As an aside, I understood that Soul provided beer in the parking lot at the Barbie thing that the Burns had at the Media Arts Lab.
Oh, did
that
they?
was
yeah,
Very successful,
yeah.
so it's great.
Yeah, he did really well in that. He has a partnership with them generally, but that was,
Yeah, and that they're doing a cafe upstairs right now. They're building it out. Mike McCormick is building it on the third floor.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's gonna be a nice thing. And they're getting, even now at their current concession stand, they sell cheese trays from Second Mouse, and there are all these
Yeah.
nice little connections going on.
That's nice.
and I think if you go back to thinking about we as a village and the events that we do and promote as a village,
Mhm.
just thinking right now, you know, Pleasantville Day, Memorial Day, Ragamuffin Parade, the tree lighting,
Mhm.
none of those events have anything to do with alcohol. We're
Yeah.
talking really the only two that the village is involved in. I'm saying alcohol sales right now. I don't know
Not
what people did. But the only ones that really the village has that there's some alcohol involved is the music festival, which has its own beer garden and
Right, right.
there.
And that's an argument every year. People want to be able to, and obviously some people do, but you know, they want to be able to take it back, and in the end, the issue, I think, prevails, and it's made sense all these years. People can have a good time in the beer garden, but they can't make the rest of the field feel like you're in some alcohol infused
Yeah,
rave.
yeah.
So
And I think that's,
that.
and I do think that's a different vibe. I mean, a concert
Yeah,
is
it
that.
doesn't apply.
Yeah, I think it's a whole different vibe. And also remember, what we're trying to do with Wheeler is have it from 3 to 8.
Would Lucy's want some involvement? I mean, he was concerned.
Yeah, I've been talking to him about that, but like, with Rob, not
Rob.
with Rob, about getting him involved in it in some way, but I know that they would want to extend it out there, but I said, it's very difficult to just extend it.
I mean, what do you want? I mean, of course, the kids thing is not at that end. It's not a stage for a new
Right.
band. I don't,
Well, you have to close
yeah,
Bedford.
Which is that's not gonna work.
Yeah.
Yeah, so exactly, so I'd have to see, but
Yeah,
also,
whatever.
for example, if let's say they decide to have a booth, right?
Yeah, they
Now
can serve
Soul has,
food, right?
Soul, yeah, they have food, but also if, let's say, Soul is selling their beer, you know, they can essentially sell other stuff that, some other beers that are not, you know, like a Budweiser or whatever, right? They don't necessarily have to sell, you know, you have different varieties of things. Not alcohol, but like I'm talking more beers. So, you know, it really depends on what they want to do. They do have really good food. Their tater tots are amazing. So I would tell him like, I would tell them try to sell your tater tots, stuff like that. I think it could work. And it'd be easy for them just to bring it from one place to the other, so. But it just depends on, you know,
Alright.
what they're
Well,
willing to
so-
do.
I think we'll kick it around with Michael and David. Also, Eric will weigh in.
Can I just ask a couple questions?
Yes, of course, because we're gonna have a
Yes.
discussion about,
In terms of Wheeler,
yeah,
last year there was a lot of pushback with vendors with insurance. If there's gonna be open container on Wheeler, people are gonna need to have higher limits for their insurance.
so now, that was that's a great question.
And I have to do tomorrow to call who we deal with for insurance.
Yeah,
To get their take on it. Just in terms of.
so
what the
that's,
limits
yeah,
Would be, I know limits are lower when it's just beer and wine rather than you add hard liquor.
yeah,
So I don't know if there's a way to maybe.
keep it to that.
It would be nice to know if we can keep it to that. I would certainly.
Yeah, I would
prefer
like that. I would too. Now, I guess the question would be also,
It's an SLA question also. I don't know if we lift the open container rule, whether we can specify what can be in the container. I'm not sure we can. I don't know.
and if now, the exemption that we have, that if you, to waive those requirements, so we do have that form and that's decided on each person, on each vendor that wants that.
Yep.
So it depends on what the vendor sells.
Is that right? Is that, or,
To my knowledge, it would be whatever.
right,
So do you have trouble getting it from vendors selling alcohol? Or the trouble is more vendors selling food or something?
like what if a person sells, like, a person sells like jewelry? And like, so that's the question, like, they're selling like, let's say it's a member that is just a registered LLC, they don't even have a storefront.
Not selling food, not.
They're not selling anything, they're just selling tchotchkes or whatever.
So generally, their liability to harm a person would be much lower, so their limits don't have to be as high. What I'm concerned about is that if they're on Wheeler, and Wheeler is where there's open container, it just naturally opens up liability for everybody, a bigger liability for everybody.
I see.
No doubt it does.
So that, and only because I know what it was for the music festival with getting insurance.
Right.
And I know what it was for the block party last year, trying to get insurance for people. And it wasn't just pushback from people selling tchotchkes, it was pushback from everybody. People who were selling alcohol, people who were selling food, they didn't want to pay for the limits that we needed to
Mhm.
protect the village. So that's one of the.
And did they in the end?
Yes and no, some did, some backed out in terms of the alcohol piece. I think we started off with, I think, what's it?
I mean, somebody's got a
I think
liquor
we started out
license.
with 5.
Someone who has a
People-
liquor license must have pretty substantial insurance to begin with, I would think.
They would tell, surprisingly.
I would
Some
think that
don't.
they should. But they weren't willing to. I think, I don't know if it's because it turns into an event rider. for the-
Probably a one-day thing, right?
I think
You're
it's a
selling-
one
That's what it
day
is,
event, which,
Selling outside of your bricks and mortar location.
Yeah, it adds to it. And that was the issue that we had with a lot of vendors, and that was another issue that I was trying to bring up is how do we do it now? I think Tarrytown did it something where, I don't know if there is something where people can buy the insurance, like buy insurance policies through an umbrella kind of, I don't know.
So it's interesting in the construction world now, I encounter this periodically on projects. And it mostly is for big things. There's an owner, OCIP, whatever, owners something. In essence, it's an owner supplied insurance policy. And all of the contractors have to pay into it. The owner basically says, I won't be, some huge institution, massive construction project, hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm not gonna take the risk that Joe, the wallboard guy, doesn't have proper insurance. I'm gonna have insurance that insures me against all of you people. And then I'm gonna charge you for it based on your percentage of the project, whatever. So, but I imagine that, I mean, I don't know that we could get a Pleasantville umbrella and part of yours,
Because we also didn't charge anyone any fees, which many places do charge fees.
Does Mount Pleasant, do you know, not require insurance?
No, they do require insurance. I just don't know how works. I don't know their limits. But like, for example, something that a lot of our vendors had an issue with was there was, the necessity to have a specific amount of car insurance. So some vendors were like, I don't even use a car for my business. Like, I mean, I have a car personally, but like, this isn't like, you know, I don't.
But if they're driving a car onto Wheeler with their stuff, that's the issue, right?
That is exactly, is that the concern?
Sure,
I guess.
yeah.
Well, it seems like it would be a good idea to talk to Terrytown and Mount Pleasant.
I mean, it's a totally a concern, for example, a music festival.
Is it also that they're like them driving from their homes to our event? Something happens to them on the
I
way
don't know about
there?
that. I think it's more if you're gonna drive a vehicle into our event to unload and to load to whatever, that's the issue.
The risk of hurting somebody. Yeah, or some property.
That's the insurance level that, and so
Yeah,
our
and
insurance.
generally, that piece of it is not such a high level, it's just you have to demonstrate.
Well, I think
So we should look at the levels and see what people say. We can,
I can set up a call,
Okay,
and,
Yeah.
and if you wanna be on it.
I love that, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that would be
he's
good,
really good, and he's,
yeah,
Okay.
and then maybe just, I could have my board, maybe like, my committee, because that's the other thing is we're trying to move forward, but at the same time. The biggest issue is this, that if, let's say we're able to do this, but then the insurance levels are so high and everyone's like, well, we're not participating in that, and we're stuck in a position where we close the road. But I mean, I guess, sure, Solar Bobby did continue to do what they're doing because they're in the center, so it benefits them. But I'd like to include so many more. Yeah, I'm not
I
concerned.
mean, I would think, you know.
Yeah,
so
I'm not
audio
concerned with
is-
his insurance, yeah.
All right, well, probably enough said on that for the moment,
Yeah.
but we've
Yeah, I think.
framed the issues. All right,
Some.
motion to go into executive session on a matter of real estate.
So moved.
So moved.
Second,
Are we still on?
all in favor? We're leaving Zoom. Thank you, anyone who remained among us.